Okay folks, put on your bell bottoms and tie-dye and get ready for a visit to the grooving 60s. Modulation effects, particularly flanging and phasing, are inextricably tied to the 1960s psychedelica, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, and so on. It's actually difficult to use flanging and phasing in an obvious way without bringing that age to mind. I'm going to give a brief explanation of what these three modulation effects are and how they're created, and then provide a musical example of two of them. The chorus effect is the most easily understood of the effects. Basically, chorus is created by feeding a slightly delayed, slightly detuned version of a sound into the original sound. It gives the illusion of more than one instrument playing the part. Flanging dates back to Abbey Road Studios in the mid-1960s. At that time, it was accomplished by sending the same signal to two identical reel-to-reel tape recorders. The signal was then fed back to the mix from the playback heads of the recorders. Flanging occurred when the engineer pressed a finger on the spool of one of the reels of tape. The speed and pitch of the recording was reduced, and the signal was then combined with the other unaltered tape, creating the warbling, whooshing sound we recognize as flanging today. Although phasing sounds somewhat similar to flanging, phasing is not created by a delay. Instead, the signal is split into two parts. One path is treated with an all-pass filter which alters the phase of the signal. When the two paths are reunited, the frequencies that are out of phase will cancel out each other, creating a comb filter effect. The position of the peaks and troughs in the comb filter are usually modulated to create the sweeping effect. The phaser effect is typically more subtle than the flanger. I've put a phaser effect on this low synth. The phaser has four sets of controls. First is the low and high pass filter section, which processes the feedback signal, that is, the amount of the affected signal routed back into the input. You can see I've set that to quite a high 82% here. Next, we have the sweep section. The first control determines the frequency range affected by the modulation. Here I've got it set between 8700 Hz and 20,000 Hz. The order control switches between different phaser algorithms. The next section lets you set the rate of the two LFOs that provide the modulation and the mix between them. Here I've got slightly different LFOs and a 50-50 mix of the two. The output mix slider sets the balance of dry and wet signals, and if set to a negative value, the phase-inverted mix of the signal. I've used a flanger with the strings and guitar. The logic flanger has very simple controls. The feedback slider determines how much of the affected signal is routed back into the input. Here I've set it to 63% because I want a nice strong effect for demonstration purposes. The speed knob sets the frequency of the LFO, so here 633 Hz looks like. And the intensity slider sets the modulation amount. The mix control sets the balance between dry and wet signals. Here I've got it completely wet. Give a listen. I'd probably never use these effects to this degree in a real recording, but used with a lighter touch, both can provide an interesting movement to a track. Hope you found this lesson useful, and thanks for listening.